One napkin. 7 words. That was all it took to change Elena Vance's life from a quiet struggle to a high-speed chase. She was just a temp nurse, trying to hide her pregnancy and make rent until she saw the white powder slip into the drink of New York's most dangerous man. If she stayed silent, he died. If she spoke, she died. So she wrote. But when Lorenzo Moretti read the note, "They poisoned your drink. Don't look up." He didn't just thank her. He dragged her into his world, into his car, and into a war she never asked for. This is the story of the nurse and the Don. The chandelier above the ballroom of the Pierre Hotel didn't sparkle, it glared. To Elena Vance, the light felt interrogative, exposing every flaw in her oversized catering uniform. She wasn't supposed to be serving drinks. She was a registered nurse, hired by the staffing agency to man the VIP first aid station in the kitchen, mostly for wealthy patrons who indulged in too much oyster tartar or fainted from corset strain. But when 2 servers called out sick, the agency manager, a red-faced man named Mr. Henderson, had shoved a tray of crystal tumblers into her hands. "Vance, get out there! The floor needs coverage!" Henderson snapped. "Sir, I'm not cleared for floor service, and I'm—" Elena trailed off, instinctively placing a hand over her apron. Underneath, she was 6 months pregnant. The oversized black vest hid the bump well enough, but standing for hours made her ankles throb. "You're paid to work," Henderson barked. "Table 4 needs a scotch. Neat. 30-year Macallan. Don't spill it, or it's coming out of your paycheck." Elena took the tray. She needed the money. Her ex-boyfriend, a corrupt beat cop named Travis, had cleared out her savings before vanishing, leaving her with nothing but a eviction notice and a baby on the way. She moved through the crowd of New York's elite. It was a sea of velvet tuxedos and silk gowns, but the air here was different. It was heavy, dangerous. This wasn't just a charity gala. It was a summit. The Moretti family was hosting the heads of the 5 families to discuss a ceasefire. Elena approached table 4. It was the center of gravity in the room. Sitting there, looking bored by the grandeur, was Lorenzo Moretti. Even in a room full of predators, Lorenzo was the apex. He wore a tuxedo that cost more than Elena's entire nursing school tuition. His dark hair was swept back, his jawline sharp enough to cut glass, and his eyes, steel gray, scanned the room with a lethargic vigilance. Standing behind him was his head of security, a man named Marco. Elena knew Marco, not personally, but she had seen him earlier in the kitchen, arguing in hushed tones with a waiter. Elena stepped up to the table. "Your scotch, sir." Lorenzo didn't look at her. He just tapped the table with a ringed finger. As Elena lowered the tray, her eyes caught movement. Marco, the security head, reached over to adjust the napkin on the table. In that split second, Elena saw it. A tiny, almost invisible flicker of powder falling from Marco's cufflink into the amber liquid of the scotch. It wasn't sugar. It dissolved instantly, but a tiny oily film remained on the surface for a fraction of a second before vanishing. Digitalis, or maybe concentrated ricin. Elena had seen drug reactions in the ER. She knew the mechanics of death, her heart hammered against her ribs. If Lorenzo drank that, he'd be dead in minutes. Cardiac arrest, clean, untraceable until the autopsy. Marco was watching her. If she said a word, he would kill her. If she spilled the drink accidentally, Marco would drag her out. And who knew what would happen then? Lorenzo reached for the glass. Time slowed. Elena's nursing instinct warred with her survival instinct. She couldn't let a patient die. Not on her watch. She grabbed a cocktail napkin from her tray. With her back slightly turned to Marco, shielding her hand with her body, She uncapped the cheap ballpoint pen she kept in her pocket for patient charts. She wrote 7 words. "They poisoned your drink. Don't look up." She placed the napkin on the table, face down, right next to his hand. Then she placed a glass of water on top of it. "Water for the chaser, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lorenzo paused. He hadn't asked for water. He frowned, his grey eyes finally flicking to her. He saw the sweat beading on her forehead. He saw the terror in her brown eyes. He looked at the napkin under the water glass. The ink was bleeding slightly through the white paper. He could see the word "poisoned" in reverse. Lorenzo Moretti didn't flinch. He didn't gasp. He didn't even look at Marco. He picked up the Scotch glass. Elena held her breath. "A toast," Lorenzo said loudly, standing up. The room went silent. Marco smiled tightly behind him. "To the future boss." Lorenzo turned, facing Marco. "To loyalty." Lorenzo threw the contents of the glass, not into his mouth, but directly into Marco's eyes. The alcohol stung, but the panic on Marco's face was the real tell. Marco screamed, clawing at his face, terrified of the liquid entering his mucous membranes. "Get her!" Marco shrieked, pointing blindly at Elena. "She spiked it!" Chaos erupted. The ballroom descended into screams. Guns were drawn faster than corks were popped. Lorenzo vaulted over the table. He didn't run for the exit. He ran for Eleanor. "Come with me," he growled. "I can't. You're dead if you stay." He didn't wait for her permission. He grabbed her hand, his grip like iron, and pulled her. They sprinted through the kitchen doors. A gunshot shattered a vase right where Elena had been standing a second before. "My car is out back!" Lorenzo shouted over the din of crashing plates. Elena struggled to keep up, one hand protecting her stomach. "I can't run fast." Lorenzo stopped. He looked down, really looking at her for the first time. He saw the way she held her belly, the protective curve of her arm. "Pregnant?" he demanded. "Yes," she gasped. Lorenzo cursed in Italian. Without hesitation, he scooped her up into his arms, bridal style. He kicked the back exit door open, carrying her into the cold New York night. The black Bugatti La Voiture Noire was idling in the alleyway, an aerodynamic shadow against the brick walls. Lorenzo threw the passenger door open and deposited Eleanor into the leather bucket seat. "Buckle up," he ordered, sliding into the driver's side. "Wait, my purse, my ID. Forget them." Lorenzo slammed the car into gear. The engine roared like a waking dragon. They peeled out of the alley just as 3 men in suits burst through the kitchen doors, firing suppressed pistols. Thwip thwip. 2 bullets sparked off the bulletproof rear windshield. Elena screamed, pressing herself into the seat. Lorenzo drove with a terrifying, surgical precision. He wove through the heavy Manhattan traffic, mounting a curb to bypass a taxi, running 3 red lights. "Who was that?" Elena cried, her hands shaking uncontrollably. "That was your head of security." "Marco," Lorenzo said, his voice terrifyingly calm. "He's been with me for 10 years. Paid off by the gallows, I assume." He glanced at her. "How did you know?" "I'm a nurse," Elena said, her breath hitching. "I saw him drop powder from his cuff. It left an oil film. It looked like a toxin." "You have sharp eyes, nurse." "Elena." Elena Vance. Elena. He tasted the name. "You realized that by writing that note, you made yourself a loose end? Marco will hunt you. If he doesn't, whoever paid him will." Elena felt nausea rise in her throat. "I couldn't let him kill you." "Why? You don't know me. People usually pray for men like me to die." "I took an oath," she whispered, "to preserve life. It doesn't come with an exclusion clause for mob bosses." Lorenzo looked at her then. The streetlights flickered across his face, illuminating the sharp angles of his profile. He looked surprised. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, looking out the window as the city skyline began to fade into the darkness of the highway. My safe house in the Catskills. It's the only place I can trust right now until I clean house. I can't go to the Catskills. I have a doctor's appointment on Tuesday. I have a life. You had a life, Lorenzo corrected grimly. That life ended the moment you put pen to napkin. Now, your life is keeping that baby safe. And the only way to do that is to stay with me. Elena looked down at her stomach. The baby kicked, a small flutter. She felt tears prick her eyes. I just wanted to pay rent. I'll buy you the building, Lorenzo said. But right now, I need you to open the glove compartment. There is a phone. I need to make a call. Elena opened the compartment. Inside lay a sleek black burner phone and a silver pistol. She flinched away from the gun, gingerly picking up the phone. She handed it to him. Lorenzo dialed a number from memory. It's me, Lorenzo said into the phone. The nest is rotten. Marco turned. I'm in the wind. A pause. No. I have a civilian with me. A witness. She saved me. He listened for a moment, his eyes narrowing. If you touch her, Lorenzo said, his voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a shout, I will burn the city to ash. Have the doctor meet us at the safe haven, and bring fetal monitors. She's pregnant. He hung up and tossed the phone into the back seat. You have a doctor coming? Elena asked. My private physician. If we are going into hiding, I need to make sure the stress didn't hurt the child. Elena stared at him. For a ruthless killer, he was strangely attentive. Why do you care? She asked. Lorenzo tightened his grip on the steering wheel. Because the Morettis pay their debts. You saved my life, Elena. That means your life and the life inside you are now under my protection. And God help anyone who tries to take what is mine. The word hung in the air. Mine. Elena shivered. It wasn't from the cold. They drove in silence for an hour, the city lights fading into the dense, dark woods of upstate New York. The adrenaline was wearing off, replaced by a bone-deep exhaustion. Elena's eyelids drooped. Sleep, Lorenzo commanded softly. I'll wake you when we're safe. I can't sleep, she mumbled, her eyes already closing. He'll find us. Let him come, Lorenzo said. I'm driving the fastest car in the world, and I have a loaded Sig Sauer in my lap. Let him come. Elena drifted off to the sound of the engine and the steady breathing of the man who had just kidnapped her to save her life. When she woke, the car had stopped. They were in front of a massive, modern cabin made of glass and steel, hidden deep within a pine forest. Snow had started to fall, dusting the windshield. Lorenzo was already out of the car. He opened her door. Can you walk? He asked. Elena swung her legs out. Her ankles were swollen. She stumbled. Before she could hit the gravel, Lorenzo caught her. Once again, he lifted her into his arms. I can walk, she protested weakly. You're carrying precious cargo, Lorenzo muttered. Humor me. He carried her up the steps to the massive oak front door. He keyed in a code, and the door swung open, revealing a warm, lit interior with a roaring fireplace. He set her down on a plush leather sofa. Stay here. I need to sweep the perimeter. You're leaving me alone? I'm locking the door. Nothing gets in here without me knowing. There is food in the kitchen. Eat. Lorenzo turned to leave, but he paused at the door. He looked back at her, huddled in her oversized waiter's vest, looking small and terrified. Elena, he said. She looked up. Thank you. He disappeared into the night. Elena sat in the silence of the luxury cabin. She looked around. It was stark, masculine. No photos, no personal touches. It was a house, not a home. She walked to the kitchen, Her stomach growled ferociously. She found cheese, grapes, and sparkling water. She ate ravenously. As she ate, she noticed a stack of papers on the kitchen island. She knew she shouldn't look, but curiosity got the better of her. It was a dossier. Photos. Maps. And on top of the pile was a photo of a man. Elena gasped, dropping a grape. The photo was of Travis, her ex-boyfriend, the cop who stole her money. But the label under his photo didn't say Police Officer Travis Miller. It said Contract Killer, Affiliation, the Gallo Family. The room spun. Travis wasn't just a bad boyfriend. He was a hitman. And if he was working for the Gallos, and the Gallos paid Marco to poison Lorenzo, her ex-boyfriend was part of the plot to kill the man who just saved her. The front door beeped. Elena spun around, expecting Lorenzo, but the man standing in the doorway, shaking snow off his coat, wasn't Lorenzo. It was Travis. He held a silenced pistol. He smiled, a cold, familiar smile that used to make Eleanor think he was charming, but now made her blood run cold. "Hey, babe," Travis said. "Small world, isn't it?" Elena backed away until her hips hit the marble kitchen island. The man she had once thought she loved, the man whose child grew inside her, stood before her, a predator in a cheap leather jacket. "How?" Elena's voice was a dry croak. "How did you find us?" Travis laughed, stepping closer. The gun didn't waver. "You really think a billionaire like Moretti drives around without a tracker? The Gallos paid a tech guy inside Moretti's garage $100,000 to plant a bug on the Bugatti. We knew where he was going before he did." He looked around the cabin, whistling low. "Nice place. Shame I have to paint the walls with his brains." "Travis, please," Elena begged, instinctively covering her stomach. "I'm pregnant. It's your baby." Travis's face twisted into a sneer. "Yeah? That's just bad timing, babe. The Gallos are paying $500,000 for Moretti's head. With that money, I can buy a new life in Mexico. Kid's just baggage." The cruelty hit Eleanor harder than a physical blow. The man she had cried over, the man she had worried about when he didn't come home at night, looked at her and their unborn child as an inconvenience. "You're disgusting," she spat. Travis's eyes hardened. He closed the distance in 2 strides, grabbing her arm. "And your leverage." He spun her around, pressing the barrel of the pistol against her temple. He dragged her toward the living room, facing the front door. "Come on out, Moretti," Travis shouted, his voice echoing through the cabin. "I know you're out there. I've got the girl." Silence, only the crackle of the fireplace and the wind howling outside. "I'll count to 3, Travis yelled, his grip tightening on Elena's arm until she whimpered. 1! Elena squeezed her eyes shut. She thought of the 7 words she wrote on the napkin. "They poisoned your drink." She didn't regret it. Even with a gun to her head, she knew she had saved a man worth 10 of Travis. 2. The front door didn't open. Instead, the massive floor-to-ceiling glass window behind them shattered with a deafening crash. Travis flinched, spinning around, dragging Elena with him. Lorenzo Moretti came through the shattered glass like a storm. He had rappelled from the roof, swinging in on a cable, boots smashing through the double-paned thermal glass. He landed in a crouch amidst the shards and snow, a gun in his right hand. Travis panicked. He fired blindly. Bang! The bullet went wide, embedding itself in the fireplace mantel. Lorenzo didn't fire back. He couldn't. Elena was in the way. Instead, he lunged. He moved with a speed that defied physics, closing the 15 feet between them before Travis could realign his aim. Lorenzo knocked the gun upward with his left hand, the discharge blasting a hole in the ceiling. With his right hand, he didn't shoot. He holstered his weapon in a fluid motion and drove his fist into Travis's throat. Travis gagged, dropping the gun, his hands flying to his crushed windpipe. He stumbled back, releasing Elena. "Get down!" Lorenzo roared. Elena dropped to the floor, crawling behind the sofa. Travis, gasping for air, pulled a jagged hunting knife from his belt. He slashed wildly. Lorenzo stepped into the swing. He didn't dodge. He accepted the cut. The blade sliced through the sleeve of his tuxedo and into his forearm, but it allowed Lorenzo to grip Travis's wrist. There was a sickening snap. Travis screamed, the knife clattering to the floor. Lorenzo didn't stop. The rage on his face was terrifying. It wasn't the cold anger of the ballroom. This was the hot, volcanic fury of a wolf whose mate had been threatened. He grabbed Travis by the collar and slammed him against the stone fireplace. "You touched her!" Lorenzo growled, his voice a low rumble. "You threatened my heir." She's nobody," Travis wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. "It's my kid." "Not anymore," Lorenzo said. Lorenzo delivered a final, thunderous right hook. Travis's head snapped back against the stone. He slid down the fireplace, unconscious before he hit the floor. Lorenzo stood over him, chest heaving. Blood dripped from his left arm, staining the pristine snow that had blown in through the broken window. He turned to look for Eleanor. "Eleanor?" She peeked out from behind the sofa, trembling. Is he dead?" "No," Lorenzo said, kicking Travis's gun away. "Death is too easy. He has information on the gallows. My men are 5 minutes out. They will take him to the basement of a building I own in Queens. He will wish he had died here." Lorenzo swayed slightly. Elena gasped. "You're bleeding." Lorenzo looked down at his arm. The tuxedo sleeve was shredded, soaked in crimson. The cut was deep. "It's a scratch," he dismissed. "It's arterial," Elena said, her nursing training overriding her shock. She scrambled up, rushing to him. "Sit down. Now." Lorenzo looked at her, amused despite the pain. "You are giving me orders? I'm the nurse. You're the patient. Sit down before you pass out and I have to drag you, which I can't do because I'm pregnant." Lorenzo chuckled, a dark, rich sound. He sank onto the leather sofa. "Fair point." The adrenaline was fading, leaving Elena's hands shaking, but her movements were precise. She had found the first aid kit in the bathroom, a military-grade trauma pack that suggested Lorenzo expected to get shot often. Lorenzo sat by the fire, his jacket and shirt removed. His torso was a map of violence. Scars from bullets, knives, and burns crisscrossed his olive skin, telling the story of his rise to power. But Eleanor tried not to stare at his chest. She focused on his forearm. The gash was ugly, 4 inches long, deep enough to see the muscle fiber. "This needs stitches," Elena said, snapping on latex gloves. "I have lidocaine here. This will sting." "Skip the lidocaine," Lorenzo said, pouring himself a glass of brandy with his good hand. "Save it. We might need it later." "Don't be a hero," Elena muttered, filling a syringe anyway. "You'll flinch, and I'll give you a crooked scar. I take pride in my work." She injected the numbing agent. Lorenzo didn't even blink. He just watched her. His grey eyes tracked her face, her focus, the way she bit her lip when she concentrated. "Who was he?" Lorenzo asked softly. Elena didn't look up as she threaded the suture needle. "Travis. My ex. We were together for 2 years." "The father?" "Biologically," Elena said, her voice bitter. "He left the day I told him I was keeping the baby. Cleaned out my bank account. I didn't know he was... this. I thought he was a cop on the take, not a hitman." She pierced his skin with the needle. Lorenzo took a sip of brandy. "He used you," Lorenzo stated. It wasn't a question. He used everyone, Elena said, tying off a knot. He saw me as a cover. A nurse girlfriend makes a corrupt cop look stable. Domestic. She looked up at Lorenzo, her eyes filling with sudden tears. He was going to kill the baby, Lorenzo. He called it baggage. Lorenzo set the glass down. The sound was sharp against the wooden table. He reached out with his uninjured hand and cupped Elena's chin. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. His skin was rough, calloused, but his touch was incredibly gentle. "Listen to me," Lorenzo commanded, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Blood does not make a father. Sacrifice makes a father. Protection makes a father." He leaned in closer. The scent of him, expensive scotch, cedarwood, and metallic blood, filled her senses. That man in the corner, Lorenzo gestured to Travis's unconscious body, has forfeited his rights. From this moment on, that child is under the protection of the Moretti family. And so are you. "Why?" Elena whispered. "I'm just a waitress to you. A temp. You are the woman who saved my life when my own brother-in-arms tried to end it," Lorenzo said intensely. "In my world, loyalty is the only currency that matters. You are rich in it. Travis is bankrupt." Elena finished the last stitch and snipped the thread. She taped a sterile gauze over the wound. "All done," she said softly, pulling back. But Lorenzo didn't let her pull back far. He kept his hand on her cheek. The air between them crackled. It was improper. He was a don. She was a destitute nurse. But the trauma of the night had stripped away social protocols. "You have nowhere to go, Elena," Lorenzo said. "My apartment in the city is compromised. This safe house is burned. The gallows are coming. So what do? We go to the one place they cannot touch us. The one place where I am not just a boss, but a king. Where is that? Sicily." Elena's eyes widened. "Italy? I don't have a passport. I've never left the tri-state area. I have a private jet waiting at Titeboro. We leave in an hour. My fixer will have a passport for you by the time we land." Just then, headlights swept across the front windows. Elena jumped. "Is that them? The gallows?" Lorenzo stood up, testing his arm. He grimaced but nodded. "No, that's the extraction team. They're here for the garbage." He pointed at Travis. 3 men in dark tactical gear entered the cabin. They didn't speak. They simply grabbed Travis by the legs and dragged him out into the snow like a sack of mulch. One of the men, a giant with a shaved head, nodded to Lorenzo. "Don, the jet is fueled. Wheels up in 40. "Good," Lorenzo said. He turned to Eleanor. He held out his good hand. "Eleanor Vance," he said formally. "Will you come with me? I cannot promise you safety. Danger follows me. But I can promise you that I will stand between you and the fire every single time." Elena looked at his hand. She looked at the blood on his shirt, blood he spilled for her. She thought of Travis, willing to sell their child for cash. She thought of her empty apartment, her empty bank account. She realized she wasn't just running away from danger. She was running toward the first man who had ever truly seen her value. She placed her hand in his. "Take me to Sicily," she said. Lorenzo's fingers closed around hers. "Andiamo." The Gulf of Castellamare glittered like a sheet of crushed sapphires under the relentless Sicilian sun. Villa Moretti sat perched on a limestone cliff, a fortress of ancient stone and creeping bougainvillea that had stood since the 16th century. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly terrifying. Elena stood on the terrace of her bedroom, the sea breeze tugging at the silk sundress Lorenzo had procured for her. It had been 2 weeks since they fled New York, 2 weeks of hiding in plain sight within the walls of the Moretti stronghold. "You should be resting," a voice rumbled from the doorway. Elena turned. Lorenzo stood there, leaning against the archway. He had shed the tailored suits of Manhattan for a white linen shirt with the sleeves rolled up and dark slacks. The bandage on his forearm was gone, replaced by a fresh pink scar. He looked less like a corporate CEO now, and more like what he truly was, a Sicilian warlord. "I'm tired of resting," Elena sighed, rubbing her lower back. Her bump had popped significantly in the last fortnight. "And I'm tired of your mother staring at me like I'm a termite in her antique furniture." Lorenzo chuckled, walking onto the terrace. He poured 2 glasses of iced lemonade from a pitcher on the table. "Donna Isabella is protective. She believes the Moretti bloodline must be pure. Bringing home an American woman, pregnant with another man's child, has disrupted her ecosystem." "Disrupted?" Elena took the glass. "She asked me yesterday if my family had a history of madness. Then she asked if I knew how to clean fish. I think she's planning to have me gutted." Lorenzo's face grew serious. He stepped closer, blocking the sun. "She knows you saved me. That buys you respect. But affection? That you have to earn. In Sicily, trust is harder to find than water in August." "And you?" Elena asked, looking up at him. The proximity made her breath hitch. "Do I have your trust?" Lorenzo didn't answer immediately. He reached out, his hand hovering over her stomach. He hadn't touched her there before. Slowly, he placed his large, warm hand over the swell of her belly. The baby kicked, a strong, sharp movement. Lorenzo's eyes widened slightly. A look of wonder crossed his stoic features. "He is strong, a fighter." "She," Elena corrected softly. "I have a feeling it's a girl." "A daughter," Lorenzo mused. "Dangerous. I will have to kill half the men in Europe to keep her safe." The tenderness in his voice made Eleanor's heart ache. It was becoming harder to remember that this was temporary, that she was a guest, a witness under protection, not the lady of the house. "Lorenzo," she whispered, "what happens when the baby comes? What happens when the gallows give up?" Lorenzo's hand tightened on her waist. "The gallows never give up, and neither do I." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her lips. The air was thick with the scent of lemons and sea salt. Elena tilted her head back, her eyes fluttering shut. "Lorenzo!" The sharp cry shattered the moment. Lorenzo pulled back, his expression instantly hardening into a mask of indifference. Donna Isabella marched onto the terrace. She was a petite woman in her 60s, always dressed in severe black, with silver hair pulled back so tight it pulled at her eyes. Those eyes were currently narrowing at Elena. "The consigliere is here," Isabella said, ignoring Elena entirely. "Uncle Santino has arrived from Palermo. He brings news of the Americans." Lorenzo's posture shifted. He was the Don again. "I'll be down in a moment, Madre." Isabella didn't leave. She stared at Elena's stomach. "You should cover yourself," she said coldly. "Modesty is a virtue, even for a woman in your situation." "Mother," Lorenzo warned, his voice low. "I am just saying," Isabella sniffed. "Santino is a traditional man. He will not understand why you are harboring a stray." "She is not a stray," Lorenzo said, stepping between the two women. "She is the reason I am standing here to greet my uncle instead of being buried in a plot in New Jersey. You will show her the respect due to the savior of the Don. Do I make myself clear?" The silence stretched, taut as a wire. Isabella looked at her son, seeing the steel in his eyes that matched her own. "Crystal!" she spat. She turned on her heel and marched away. Lorenzo let out a breath. He turned to Elena. "I have to go. Stay in your room. Santino is complicated. He was my father's brother. He feels he should have been Don, not me. Is he dangerous? Everyone here is dangerous, Elena. Lock the door. Lorenzo left. Elena waited a beat, then walked to the door. She locked it. But curiosity, a trait that had gotten her into this mess in the first place, gnawed at her. She waited 10 minutes, then unlocked the door. The villa was vast, a labyrinth of marble corridors. She crept toward the heavy oak doors of the library, where the men usually held court. She could hear voices raised in argument. "You bring the war to our doorstep, Lorenzo," a gravelly voice shouted. "That must be Uncle Santino. The gallows have allied with the Russians. They are burning our ports in Jersey, and you are here, playing house with a nurse." The nurse identified the poison. Lorenzo's voice was calm, icy. Marco was the traitor. If she hadn't spoken, the family would be headless right now. "Would you have preferred that, Uncle? It would have cleared the chair for you." A heavy silence followed. "Watch your tongue, boy," Santino growled. "I served your father while you were still in diapers. I am trying to save this family. We need to cut ties. Give them the girl. A peace offering." Elena clapped a hand over her mouth to stifle a gasp. "Never," Lorenzo said. The word was absolute. "She is under my protection. Omerta. She is a liability. The gallows have put a $5 million bounty on her head. Do you think the guards at the gate won't be tempted? Do you think the maids aren't listening? You are risking the entire empire for a piece of—" There was a sound of a slam, like a fist hitting a desk. "Finish that sentence, Santino, and you will leave this room without your tongue." Elena's heart raced. He was defending her, not just as an asset, but as something more. "Fine," Santino huffed. "But you are blind. The enemy is closer than you think. There is a reason Marco turned. Someone bigger turned him. The gallows are just the muscle. The puppeteer is still in the shadows." "I will find him," Lorenzo promised. "And I will kill him." Elena backed away, intending to return to her room. But as she turned the corner, she bumped into a maid carrying a basket of linens. "Scusi, signora," the maid mumbled, keeping her head down. Elena noticed the maid's hands were shaking, and inside the basket, hidden under the towels, was a sleek, black object. It wasn't a cleaning supply. It was a jamming device. Elena had seen similar tech in the movies. The maid hurried past her toward the West Wing, where the security server room was located. Elena realized with a jolt of horror the jamming device would cut the villa's communications and disable the perimeter alarms. The enemy wasn't coming. They were already inside. Elena didn't run to her room. She ran back to the library. She burst through the heavy oak doors, breathless. Lorenzo and Santino, a bear of a man with a thick white beard, spun around. Santino's hand went instantly to the gun inside his jacket. "Elena!" Lorenzo barked. "I told you to stay. The alarms!" Elena gasped, clutching her side. "A maid, in the hallway. She has a jammer. She's going to the server room." Lorenzo didn't question her. He didn't hesitate. He pulled a silver Beretta from his waistband and tapped his earpiece. "Security, status report." "Static. Damn it," Lorenzo hissed. He looked at Santino. "She's right. The comms are down." "Impossible," Santino said, though his face had gone pale. "The perimeter is impenetrable." "Nothing is impenetrable if you have a key," Lorenzo said. He grabbed Elena's arm. "We need to get to the panic room. Now." Boom! An explosion rocked the villa. The floor shook, and plaster dust rained down from the frescoed ceiling. The blast had come from the front gates. "They breached the main gate!" Lorenzo shouted. "Santino, rally the men in the courtyard! Hold the line!" Santino nodded, pulling his weapon. For all his bluster, the old man was a soldier. He ran toward the chaos. Lorenzo pulled Elena in the opposite direction, toward the servants' passages. "My mother!" Lorenzo said through gritted teeth. "I have to get my mother." "She's in the garden!" Elena cried. "I saw her from the balcony," Lorenzo cursed. The garden was exposed. They sprinted through the kitchen, where staff were screaming and hiding under tables. Gunfire erupted outside, the distinct rat-a-tat-tat of automatic weapons. They burst out the side door into the lemon grove. The air was thick with smoke. In the center of the garden, by the fountain, stood Donna Isabella. She was frozen, staring at the gate where 3 black SUVs had crashed through. Men in tactical gear were pouring out, firing at the Moretti guards. "Madre!" Lorenzo screamed. A gunman turned toward Isabella, raising a rifle. Lorenzo raised his pistol and fired while running. Bang! Bang! 2 clean shots. The gunman dropped, but more were coming. "Get down!" Lorenzo dove, tackling his mother to the ground behind the stone fountain, just as bullets chipped away the marble cherub above them. Elena was exposed near the lemon trees. "Elena, move!" Lorenzo roared. She scrambled behind a thick, ancient olive tree. Her heart was hammering so hard she thought it would bruise her ribs. She looked at the attackers. They weren't just random thugs. They moved with military precision, and leading them, barking orders, was a man in a white suit. Elena squinted through the smoke. She recognized him from the dossier she had seen at the safe house. It was Luca Gallo, the heir to the Gallo crime family. He had come personally. "Come out, Moretti!" Luca shouted, his voice carrying over the gunfire. "Give us the girl and we leave your mother alive. Keep the girl and we burn this whole history lesson to the ground." Lorenzo was pinned behind the fountain, his mother beneath him. He had a clear shot at Luca, but Luca was using a human shield, one of the Moretti maids. Lorenzo looked at Elena, hidden behind the tree 20 feet away. Their eyes met. He shook his head slightly. No, he would not give her up. Elena looked at the carnage. Guards were dying. Isabella was terrified. Lorenzo was trapped. It was her fault, all of it. If she surrendered, they would kill her. They would kill the baby. But Lorenzo and his mother might live. If she stayed, everyone died. Elena's hand went to her pocket. She felt the heavy weight of the spare magazine Lorenzo had given her, just in case. She didn't have a gun, but she had an idea. The lemon grove was irrigated by an old system of pipes. Right next to Luca's position was the main pressure valve for the estate's water system. It was old, rusted, and under immense pressure. Elena looked around. On the ground, near the gardener's shed, was a flare gun, standard issue for coastal villas to signal boats. She had to move. "Elena, stay put!" Lorenzo shouted, sensing her shift. Elena didn't listen. She took a deep breath. "For the baby," she whispered. She broke cover, sprinting toward the shed. "There she is!" Luca yelled. "Don't shoot her! I want her alive!" The gunmen held their fire, confused. That hesitation was all Elena needed. She slid into the shed, grabbing the flare gun. She popped up, not aiming at the men, but at the massive, rusted iron valve behind them. She pulled the trigger. The flare hissed through the air, a streak of red phosphorus. It struck the rusted joint of the high-pressure valve. The heat and impact shattered the corroded metal. Karush! A jet of water, pressurized to feed the entire estate, exploded outward with the force of a fire hose. It slammed into Luca and his men, knocking them off their feet, blinding them with water and mud. "Now!" Elena screamed. Lorenzo didn't waste the opening. He stood up, abandoning cover. With the precision of a master marksman, he fired. One shot. Luca Gallo, struggling to stand against the torrent of water, took the bullet in the shoulder. He spun around, dropping his weapon. Lorenzo advanced, firing methodically, taking down the 2 guards flanking Luca. He reached Luca, grabbed him by the lapels of his ruined white suit, and threw him against the stone wall of the garden. Lorenzo pressed the hot barrel of his gun against Luca's forehead. The gunfire ceased. The surviving attackers, seeing their leader captured, dropped their weapons. Moretti guards, led by a bleeding but alive Uncle Santino, swarmed the garden, securing the perimeter. Lorenzo didn't look at the guards. He stared into Luca's eyes. "You came into my house," Lorenzo whispered. "You threatened my mother." He glanced at Elena, who was leaning against the shed, gasping for air, clutching her belly. "And you hunted my wife." The word rang out across the silent garden. Wife. Donna Isabella, brushing dirt off her black dress, looked up sharply. Santino froze. Elena felt her knees go weak. Luca laughed, blood staining his teeth. "Wife? You married the help. The other families will laugh you out of the commission." "Let them laugh," Lorenzo said, "but they will do it quietly." Bang! Lorenzo pistol-whipped Luca, knocking him cold. He didn't kill him. Not yet. He needed answers. Lorenzo turned and walked toward Elena. He ignored his mother. He ignored his uncle. He reached Elena and pulled her into a crushing embrace. He buried his face in her neck, breathing in her scent, shaking slightly. "You foolish, brave woman," he murmured against her skin. "You could have been killed." "I saw an opening," Elena whispered, wrapping her arms around his rigid back. "I took it." Lorenzo pulled back, framing her face with his blood-stained hands. "I called you my wife," he said, his voice intense. "Did you hear me?" "I heard you. You were just saying it to—" "No," Lorenzo cut her off. "I said it because it is the only way to end this. If you are my wife, you are a Moretti. An attack on you is a declaration of total war against all 5 families. It is the ultimate shield." He looked deep into her eyes. "Marry me, Elena. Tonight. In the chapel, we end this." Elena looked at him. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a clarity she hadn't felt in months. She saw the man beneath the monster. The man who protected his mother, who defended his home, who treated her unborn child as his own blood. She looked over his shoulder. Donna Isabella was watching them. The old woman didn't look angry anymore. She looked impressed. She gave a curt, almost imperceptible nod. Elena looked back at Lorenzo. "Okay," she whispered. "Yes." Lorenzo kissed her then, fierce, possessive, and full of promise. But as they kissed, Uncle Santino walked over to the unconscious body of Luca Gallo. He searched Luca's pockets and pulled out a phone. Santino frowned. He walked over to Lorenzo and Elena, interrupting the moment. "Lorenzo," Santino said, his voice trembling. "Look at this." He held up Luca's phone. It was open to a text message thread. The last message, sent 10 minutes ago, read, "Gates are open. Jammer is active. Make it look like an accident. M." "M," Lorenzo read. "Marco is dead. Who is M?" Santino scrolled up. There was a photo attached to an earlier message. It was a photo of the villa's security schematics. Schematics that were kept in a safe that only 3 people could access. Lorenzo, Santino, and Donna Isabella. Lorenzo turned slowly to look at his mother. Isabella stood by the fountain, her face unreadable, but her hand was clutching a locket around her neck, a locket that bore the initial M, not for Moretti, but for Massimo, her first love, a man from the Gallo family, whom she was forbidden to marry 40 years ago. Lorenzo's blood ran cold. The traitor wasn't a greedy guard or a jealous uncle. The call was coming from inside the house. The silence in the lemon grove was heavier than the gunfire that had preceded it. The water from the broken pipe hissed, turning the dust into mud. But no one moved. All eyes were fixed on the phone in Santino's hand, and the woman standing by the fountain. Donna Isabella didn't run. She didn't scream. She simply smoothed the wet silk of her dress, her face composing itself into a mask of terrifying serenity. "Give me the phone, Santino," she said, holding out a hand that did not tremble. "Madre," Lorenzo said, his voice sounding like it was being dragged over broken glass. "Tell me it's a mistake. Tell me you didn't sell your own son to the butchers who killed father." Isabella looked at Lorenzo. Her eyes, usually so sharp, were filled with a strange, pitying sadness. "Your father was a fool, Lorenzo, and you are just like him, a war dog. You only know how to bite." She took a step forward, her heels clicking on the wet stones. Massimo Gallo offered peace, a union of the families, a way to end the bloodshed that has claimed my husband and 2 of my brothers. All I had to do was remove the one obstacle standing in the way of the treaty. "Me," Lorenzo whispered. "I was the obstacle." "You refused the sit-down," Isabella said coldly. "You refused the territory split. You chose war. I chose survival. I chose the family." "You chose a grave," Lorenzo roared, his restraint snapping. He stepped over Luca Gallo's unconscious body. "You gave them the codes. You let them in. If Eleanor hadn't blown the valve, we would all be dead. Do you think Luca came here to negotiate? He came to exterminate us." Isabella looked at Luca, then back to Lorenzo. A flicker of doubt crossed her face. "Massimo promised. He promised no harm would come to me. He said you would be removed surgically, painlessly." Lorenzo laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Massimo Gallo has been dead for 10 years, Mother. He died in prison. Who have you been talking to?" Isabella went pale. "No, I write to him. He writes back. The letters. The locket." Lorenzo snatched the phone from Santino. He dialed the number labeled M. A phone began to ring. It wasn't far away. It was ringing in the pocket of Luca Gallo, the man lying in the mud. Lorenzo reached down and pulled a second phone from Luca's pocket. He held it up. The screen displayed Isabella. "There is no Massimo," Lorenzo said, his voice hollow. "It was Luca. He played you. He used your old romance to manipulate you into opening the gates. You didn't sell me out for love, Mother. You sold me out for a ghost." The revelation shattered Isabella. The haughty matriarch crumbled. Her knees gave way, and she sank onto the edge of the fountain, covering her face with her hands. A wail, primal and broken, escaped her throat. She had betrayed her blood for a lie. Uncle Santino raised his gun. His face was grim. "The penalty for treason is death, Don Moretti, even for blood." Elena stepped forward. "No." The men looked at her. Elena, soaked, covered in mud, clutching her pregnant belly, stood between the executioner and the traitor. "Elena, move," Lorenzo warned. "She tried to have you killed." "And she will have to live with that," Elena said, her voice shaking but firm. "She will have to live knowing she almost killed her own grandchild. Killing her makes you the monster she thinks you are. It makes you just another Gallo." She looked at Lorenzo. "You said you wanted to build a different life. A life where our daughter is safe. Does that life start with matricide?" Lorenzo looked at Eleanor. He saw the strength in her, the moral compass he had lost long ago. She was right. If he killed his mother, the stain would never wash off. It would poison the marriage, poison the child. He lowered his gun. He turned to Santino. "Put the weapon away, Uncle." Lorenzo walked over to his mother. He didn't touch her. He looked down at her with eyes that were no longer angry, just empty. "You wanted to save the family name," Lorenzo said quietly. "So you will keep it. But you will not keep the life." "Lorenzo," Isabella whispered, looking up, tears streaming down her face. "You are exiled," Lorenzo pronounced. His voice was the voice of a king, absolute and final. "You will go to the Covenant of Santa Lucia in the mountains. You will take no money, no phone, no jewels. You will spend the rest of your days praying for the souls you tried to send to hell. If you ever leave those walls, if you ever speak the name Moretti again, Santino will find you." Isabella sobbed, bowing her head. It was a mercy she didn't deserve. "Take her," Lorenzo ordered 2 guards. As they dragged the weeping woman away, the sun began to set over the Mediterranean, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and gold. Lorenzo stood alone in the center of the garden. He looked like a man who had lost everything, even though he had won. Elena walked to him. She took his blood-stained hand in hers. "I'm still here," she whispered. Lorenzo looked at her. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "I know. And that is all that matters." 3 hours later, the chapel of Villa Moretti was lit by 1,000 candles. There were no guests, no banquet, no music. The bodies had been cleared, the blood washed away. But the tension remained. Lorenzo stood at the altar. He had showered and changed into a fresh black suit, but his eyes were weary. The doors opened. Elena walked in. She wore a white silk dress found in the villa's archives. Simple, elegant, flowing over her baby bump. She held a bouquet of wild flowers picked from the very garden where she had almost died. Uncle Santino walked her down the aisle. The old man, usually so gruff, patted her hand gently. "You have the heart of a lioness, girl," he muttered. "You are worthy." When they reached the altar, Lorenzo took her hands. His grip was desperate, as if she were the only thing tethering him to the earth. The priest, a nervous man roused from his bed, began the Latin rites. "Do you, Lorenzo?" "I do," Lorenzo said, his eyes never leaving Elena's face. "Do you, Elena?" Elena looked at the man who had kidnapped her, saved her, and fought for her. She saw the scars on his soul and the love in his eyes. "I do. I pronounce you man and wife." Lorenzo kissed her. It wasn't the hungry kiss of the garden. It was a seal, a vow. It tasted of survival. "I have a wedding gift," Lorenzo whispered against her lips. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a passport. Elena Moretti. "And one more thing," he said. He motioned to Santino. Santino stepped forward with a silver tray. On it lay a single, heavy iron key. "The key to the vault," Lorenzo said. "Where the money is, where the secrets are, where the power is. It was my mother's. Now it is yours. You are the Donna now, Elena. You run this house. You keep us honest." Elena took the key. It was cold and heavy. It was a burden, but she wasn't afraid. She placed her hand on her stomach. "We will run it differently," she said. "Yes," Lorenzo agreed. "We will." The nursery was painted a soft, pastel yellow. Sunlight streamed in through the bulletproof windows, illuminating the crib. Lorenzo Moretti, the most feared man in Sicily, the capo of capos, stood over the crib, making a ridiculous face. "Ba-ba-ba," he cooed. Inside the crib, baby Sophia, 3 months old, with her father's grey eyes and her mother's smile, giggled, reaching for his finger. Lorenzo let her grab his pinky. His hand, which had ended lives, was infinitely gentle. Elena leaned against the doorframe, watching them. She held a cup of coffee, enjoying the peace. The gallows were broken, their leadership dismantled after Luca's interrogation and subsequent disappearance. The business was legitimate now, shipping, real estate, tech. The guns were locked away. Lorenzo sensed her presence. He turned, smiling. The shadows were gone from his face. "She has a strong grip," he said proudly. "She will be a fighter." "She better be," Elena smiled, walking over to wrap her arms around his waist. "She has a lot of uncles to keep in line." Lorenzo kissed Elena's forehead. "She has a mother who stopped a war with a water pipe. I think she will be fine." He looked back down at his daughter. "They poisoned my drink," Lorenzo murmured, quoting the note that started it all. "But you saved my soul." Elena rested her head on his chest, listening to the steady, strong beat of his heart. "Don't look up," she whispered back. "I don't need to," Lorenzo said, pulling his wife and daughter into his arms. "Everything I need is right here." And that is the story of Elena and Lorenzo. What started with a poisoned drink and a desperate note on a napkin ended with the fall of an empire and the rise of a new family. It's a reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of courage, 7 words scribbled in panic, can change the course of destiny. Elena went from a struggling nurse to the Queen of Sicily, not because she was ruthless, but because she was brave enough to care. What do you think? Should Lorenzo have forgiven his mother, or was exile too kind? And would you have had the guts to write that note? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this roller coaster of romance, danger, and karma, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a story. We have a new dark romance thriller coming next week that involves a runaway bride and a bounty hunter you won't want to miss. Thanks for watching.